In this episode of Unpacked,
I heard and I wanted to confirm what exactly they were saying.
About 10 minutes later, she came back and was like, Saidy Brown, you tested positive for HIV.
And if anyone has a problem with my status, they should come to me.
they were trying to humiliate you and bully you. In today's episode, both of our guests share their stories of being born HIV positive. Two very, very different experiences, but two extraordinary journeys. Let's unpack. Nontombi Lekoane from Springs in Gauteng and Saidy Brown from Itsoseng in the Northwest both discovered at a very young age that they were born HIV positive. After the initial shock, they both have been living positively with the virus amidst many trials and tribulations. They have taken a stand against the stigma that people living with HIV often face on a daily basis. In their own different ways, both Saidy and Nontombi want to ensure that the perspectives of young people living with HIV are listened to. Today, they share their journey. These are their stories. Let's unpack. Joining us in studio today, we speak to Nontombi. Thank you so much for coming to chat to us about your story.
Thank you, Lebo.
And then via video con, we have Saidy. Saidy, how are you?
Hi, Lebo. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for joining us as well. And I think it's so fascinating that the two of you actually happen to know each other.
Yes.
Okay. We'll put two and two together later on in the show. I'm going to start with you, Nontombi. I mean, we've already explained from the top of the show that you're born HIV positive. And I think it was important to differentiate because there's so many dynamics that one wouldn't think about. When a person discloses their status as an adult to people, one would assume they contracted it in their life. Whereas in the case of yourself, you actually were born HIV positive.
Yes.
And there's so many dynamics we don't think about. So what are some of the things that maybe people at home don't think would be a factor in your life that you had to experience, that you did experience, that somebody who contracted later in their life would never have to deal with?
Okay. This is like, it will forever be that topic where it's always a taboo in our communities. And, you know, when one thinks of HIV, it's always about, sex. She was going around with boys. She was not taking care of herself. Like, it's always linked to the sex. And we never think of incidences that could happen, that maybe I fell, I had a cut, and maybe I was helping a friend or something happened maybe at work, or I was even born with it. But those are like far-fetched facts. So in our communities, it's always about the sex, being reckless, and being that promiscuous young person who's just not taking care of yourself. Yeah, so it's really challenging.
Saidy, do you also find that the perception around HIV is very centered around sex, and maybe that's linked to the fact that a big part of the messaging, many years ago was condomize? Yeah. So that was always, is that what your experience has been?
Yes, Lebo. I do think that a lot of the times when we say that we are living with HIV, the first thing that people think of is that, you were having sex. For instance, when I started coming out with my status, I would just, put out my age there, and I wouldn't say how I contracted HIV because I was very intentional about not saying how, because that's just stigma on its own, right? And a lot of people were just saying, yes, what were you doing at that age? And I'm just like, there are so many different ways of getting HIV, and we just to unlearn this stigma that is attached to sex and to HIV.
So, I mean, I recently became a mom, and I can't even imagine being in a situation where I would have to break those news to my child. Yeah. So before we even get to that part, what did you know about your parents and their status prior to finding out about yourself?
Okay, so with me, it was quite different. Yes, I've always been that inquisitive child from a young age, but I would restrict some of the things that I would hear or maybe even listen to. So I've always been that child who studies I would do my research. And I didn't really have that thing of, when I grow up, I don't want to have AIDS, because I would see how my peers in primary would perceive having HIV and changing it to having AIDS. So you could see that, okay, there's actually a gap here and there's a huge misunderstanding. So with my parents, I actually lived more with my mother more than with my father. So she was more of a single parent and she was always transparent. So it was kind of hard to understand some of the things. But when it came to HIV and status, it didn't really play in my mind until we started going to the clinics for the regular checkups. And then that's when I could see that, okay, something is happening here and I need to do my own research while my mother does her own on the side. Yeah.
So did she ever actually straight out tell you, or it's just something you always knew?
She didn't tell me. I actually found out before she could actually tell me
about her status.
About my status.
Oh no, we're gonna get there. But about her status, so you never knew.
No.
That's sure. Yeah.
No, she didn't.
And in your case, Saidy, I mean, as I was saying, I can't imagine the difficulty of a parent having to have that conversation. Were you aware of your parents' status?
So I wasn't aware of my parents' status. So my mom passed on when I was 10 and my dad when I was 9, right? So, I mean, I saw them get sick and they eventually passed on, but it never even occurred to me at that age that it could have been HIV or AIDS-related illnesses, because also we look at HIV as this thing that isn't really for us, right? That's just how as we don't like putting ourselves in those situations. So it was not even something that I was thinking of when I saw them get sick. So we never really had those open conversations about HIV or AIDS. Yeah.
I think maybe just, and maybe you can clarify for me. I mean, I have an uncle who died of HIV, related illnesses. And at the time, the conversation was TB. Did that was that also the conversation that was happening in your home? Even though at some point I got old enough that I understood actually it's HIV related.
So with me, I didn't even get that information. It didn't even get that far. It was just like you saw mom get sick, you saw dad get sick, and they passed on. So there were no conversations. I just went through my teenage years. I'm trying to assume and conclude that it must have been this or that. I didn't really know what was happening.
So, don't tell me, how did you actually then find out about your status? Because you now completely in the dark, which must have made it even more shocking. How old were you? Where were you? What happened?
Okay, so I was actually 10 years old. It was 2004. I was doing grade 4, if I remember correctly. So my mother and I would constantly go to the clinic. She wouldn't say anything to me because I wasn't feeling sick or anything like that. So we would just wake up, go to the clinic. But I got concerned with how much I kept missing school. And the teachers were absolutely fine with it. But I was like, no, something is happening here. And then we got to the clinic the other time and the doctor was like, no, she's old enough now. I think you need to tell her what's happening. So when they both stepped out, my eyes were big enough to see what's written in the file.
So you heard?
I heard and I wanted to confirm what exactly they were saying. So I read the file. I could actually sneak peek on the file to say, oh, I'm actually HIV positive. Wow. It's fine. And then my mother was like, no, it's fine. I'll tell her tonight when we get home. I'll try make time. That's what she said because she was really nervous and shaky about it. Then we got home.
So you found out, you read it, it confirmed, and then you kept quiet.
I kept quiet until we got home. Okay, we got home. She kept pacing up and down. I could see that she was really nervous. And then she called me. And then she's like, no, I really need to talk to you. Okay, in my mind, I already know what's going to happen. And then we go. She had a back room outside at home. And then she's like, okay, what I'm going to tell you... she got all emotional. And before she could even say anything, I was like, okay, wait, it's fine. I know what you're going to say. You're going to tell me that I'm HIV positive. I was born with it. And it's time where I'll have to start treatment and I'm going to take it for the rest of my life. And she was shocked. She actually started crying. I'm not sure if she was shocked at the fact that how did I find out, or how I'm actually taking all of this because I was really young. And then I was like, no, it's okay, it's fine. I mean, you're a single parent, and me pointing questions and wanting answers that I can't get, it's going to be useless because it's just me and you. Let's just do this. Just be there for me and we can get through it.
I don't even want to ignore the fact, because right now you're very calm when you speak about it. What was happening inside of you back then? Were you angry? Like, why didn't you tell me?
No, I wasn't. I mean, she's my mother, and I really didn't want to put her through that journey of pain. It's pain enough that she was a single parent at the time, and me being obsessive about questions and adding onto her pain would be really selfish. So it's just me and her. We had to do it together.
Oh, Saidy, from your side, what was your experience? How and when did you find out?
So I was 14 years old. I was in grade 10, and it was just around Youth Day. And I remember being one of the learners who were chosen to go represent my school at this event, right? Youth Day event. And we got there, and there were people from some other organization, and they said, guys, do you guys know anything about VCT, voluntary counseling and testing? And we were not quite knowledgeable about that. And they were like, okay, cool. So this is what we do. And if you'd like to have an HIV test, come through. It's free. And of course, as a 14-year-old, I'm not dating. I'm not having sex. So I'm just like, I'm going to do it for the sake of making memories. And just for the sake of sounding smart, for the sake of going back home and saying, I know my HIV status. So I got into that room. I remember that woman didn't even give me like pre-test counseling. She just asked me 2 questions. She asked what I would do if my results came back positive and what I would do if they came back negative. And that was it. About 10 minutes later, she came back and was like, Saidy Brown, you tested positive for HIV. Yeah, so that's pretty much how I found out about my HIV status. It was at a school trip.
So what was the first thing you did? Because you're not even around family, and like you were saying, you knew and understood where you're at. You went in with the confidence of this is definitely negative.
So the first thing I said, honestly, I just felt a lot of confusion because I was genuinely confused. And the first thing I said, and the only thing I remember saying was, but I'm just 14. I didn't do anything. Because in my mind, I was so naive in my thinking. And I was like, I didn't do anything. What do you mean? I even asked for like a second test. And she said, listen, it's standard that we use 2 test materials. So if they both are saying positive, then we'll be wasting time. So I wanted to cry immediately. I wanted to just break down. But I just thought that if I cry, by the moment I walk out, my friends know what happened. So I just took
because everybody was participating in the same thing.
Yes, yeah. So I walked out. I found them all excited because we were so young, and I think we were all just so fascinated about the idea of having HIV tests. So and I think I was like the last one because when I got out, everyone was just sharing their statuses, and they were like, "And you?" And initially, I said it's HIV positive, but I could see like the tension. I could feel the tension, and I said, "No, I'm joking. It's HIV negative," and that is just how I went on with my life.
And I mean, obviously, your experiences are completely different, but I can imagine equally traumatic, where you found out not even in the way that your own mother wanted to find out. You found out around people who were all expecting that we're going to be celebrating together. So, my sister, you know, I think I'm in shock just from the part that you are right. The way that HIV has been handled, you know, from the beginning, is it's so centered around sex, which means many people do not know. There hasn't really been a public conversation to say, if your child is going to be born HIV positive, because also the assumption is still that you shouldn't be having a child that's going to be HIV positive because they're not going to live. So maybe from your experience and your understanding, how is it that you're 26 years old and you're HIV positive, and you've been HIV positive for 26 years, and there are people like Nkosi Johnson that people remember that died as a child?
Okay. With me, I could say that it was all about perception. Like, I made a choice to myself that it's either I pick my peace, my treatment, and love with support, or do I take the opinions? Because I believe that most of the HIV related deaths, they're not formed by the virus, but it's rather the opinions of what the society thinks of us. And we take all of that and we put it in our hearts and our minds, and everything starts getting disturbed. Like, because we're so worried to say, oh, what is Lebo going to say about me when she sees me at the clinic with my green card? So you're going to start hiding now. And that's you hiding a part of your peace, because you just need to let it out. It's fine. It's your treatment. At least you know what you're dealing with, unlike having to hide and listening to all the opinions and all the other negative stuff that will do you nothing, but just lead you to an early grave. So I was like, hey, this is me. This is my life. I'm going to do this.
And from your side, Saidy, just in terms of, exactly the same question about your understanding and how it is you're 26 years old, but you are HIV positive and you've lived being HIV positive for that long.
Yeah, I do think that Nontombi is right in what she's saying, that it's all about perception. I chose my happiness very early. I mean, as much as my teenage years were filled with me just being very resentful towards my parents, towards my aunt, towards everyone, towards my siblings, I got to a point where I was just like, this happened to you. You can't change it. You just have to change how you move on from it. So I'm very passionate about changing this whole narrative about how HIV is supposed to look like, about how people who are living with HIV are meant to be seen or are meant to live like. So I had to start with myself and say, this is who I am. And honestly, I can't change it. I only just have my life ahead of myself. And I'm going to try to do the best that I can to live my best life regardless of my HIV status. And honestly, that really helped me quite a great deal.
So just to be clear, you never had a moment of being angry with your parents?
Never.
Not once?
When it comes to my status, never.
And also when it comes to how it was disclosed, how you found out all of those details?
I was never angry.
Okay. Saidy, were you angry?
I was very angry. I was really resentful towards everyone. I felt like it was unfair that I had to find out at a school trip. I felt like God doesn't exist, or God probably hates me. I felt like I wish my aunt could have maybe told me or tried to have me tested. I felt like my siblings couldn't relate to me, or I couldn't relate to them because I'm the only one who was born with HIV. So I was pretty much resentful towards everyone. I was also quite resentful at how people were treating people who are living with HIV, because I was just like, now this situation as a teenager, remember that I was in grade 10 and I still had to go back to school and still had to leave those LO lessons where my classmates will still make comments about people who were in HIV. So I was really just resentful towards the whole world, and I just felt like the entire world was just out to get me.
And maybe this is going to be a very unfair question I'm going to ask you, Saidy, but if you could have, advised your family or your parents how to tell you, what would you have said to them?
I genuinely just wish that it could have happened here at home. And it is something that I say a lot to other parents who I speak to, like on social media. It's like, honestly, as children, we are inquisitive, right? And we will want to know. And if an opportunity arises that maybe you have to have an HIV test, if you don't think that your result is going to come back positive, you're obviously going to go through and have a test just like I did. So a lot of the times people, like children who are born with HIV, find out by accident. And it's so unfair that we have to find out by accident when we could literally just sit down and have a conversation. And I'm not saying that it could be easier that way, but I'm saying I do believe that it's only fair.
So, Nontombi, I mean, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced in general in your life since finding out your status and actually coming to terms with, okay, this is it. This is what life is going forward?
Okay, for me, it was different. I've been through challenges according to what people have seen, but for me, I don't feel like I've been through any hardships or challenges or difficulties, because there would be times, like in high school, I remember there was this one time I came to school and my journal was actually missing, and then only to find out that someone wrote a big note on the walls, like in the toilets. And they were like, no, don't go in there. And I'm like, why? What's happening? So someone wrote something about my status and actually stated my name. They're like, no, don't go there. Just don't go now. It's not safe. And I'm like, guys, what's happening? Just say it. And the principal was like, no, we need to talk to you, because my mother was actually working at my school at the time. She was part of the feeding scheme team. So they called her to say, someone wrote about your child's status on the school toilets. We don't know, should we excuse you and your child, or maybe do you want to take a break? And she sat there crying, and I'm like, I'm not going anyway. I'm in school and I'm going to continue with school. And if anyone has a problem with my status, they should come to me. And they were like, no. And at that time, it was like 5 minutes before assembly. And they said they're discussing if I'm okay. Probably they thought I was crazy or high on something. And I was like, no, please give me
Because you were playing it cool and calm.
they're like, no, this child is not okay. Maybe they wanted me to cry or shout. And I was like, no, just give me 2 minutes of your time at assembly so that I address this elephant in the school. And they were like, okay, just don't do anything stupid. And I'm like, I got this, don't worry. I went to assembly and I was like, I'm aware of what's happening in the school toilets. Yes, it's true. And if anyone has a problem with it, please come to me. I'll explain to you further about how it happened.
That is so brave of you.
Everything.
I mean, I have goosebumps just because there are adults who wouldn't be able to face up to they were trying to humiliate you and bully you.
Yeah.
But on top of that, they stole your diary.
Yeah.
Which your most personal, intimate thoughts.
Like
and when now you
everything.
say, I'm going to sit here and...
Yeah, because I was like, no, I wanted to do that because I think that's where I got the drive to say, no, I need to change perception around HIV and how young people actually think like around this topic or the virus itself. So after that, people were actually coming up to me to say, so how are you dealing with it? I actually have a cousin. I'm also taking treatment. Do you notice these pills? Do you think they're going to work for me? So I was like, oh, okay. I'm getting there. The change is coming. I was
you
really
became a
happy
young
with it.
activist.
Yes.
Okay. Saidy, on your side, what are some of major challenges that happened since finding out? Obviously, your journeys are just so completely different, which I love because the stories out there are many, and yours are only 2 that we are speaking about.
So I used to struggle a lot with internalized stigma. Like me finding out about my HIV status and having to navigate through my teen years, having to disclose people like my friends. I really actually cared about how they would look at me. I felt like if I was to cough in class, like maybe in high school, or if I was to say that I was sick and they would be asking what's wrong, I just felt like it was that evident that I was HIV. I was fortunate enough to have a very supportive family. I have a very supportive group of friends. So my support system is quite solid. But the manner in I viewed myself and the manner in which I viewed this entire HIV thing at the time, I just felt like I don't think that I'm worthy of being loved. There was even a point where I felt like I was less pretty and all those things because it really tempered with my self-confidence.
I think considering your age, I can't imagine being a teenager, having to deal with normal teenager things, school pressure, peer pressure. Now there's this additional thing which there isn't a manual. So, I mean, did you maybe on your side, Nontombi, have any kind of support? Because now that you found out your status and you've got doctors, did they give you counseling? Because it's not that you just got it, but now it's like, okay, now you know your status, we're offering you counseling.
They did offer counseling, not that I really needed it because
When you were you were in
my
there.
mother wouldn't complain of any incidences, maybe suicide or anything like that. But everything was just fine. I would attend support groups though, because
Nice.
at the time there were many of us as kids with HIV and we didn't really understand some of the things. And so they would put us together in a room or camp or wherever we would go just to like vibe together and get to know some of the things. Yeah.
Saidy, on your side?
No, I didn't get any counseling. And I remember telling my friend about, my entire journey. And she was just saying that you need to be on, like, you need to seek professional help. But because I was so resentful at the time, I was just like, you know what? I don't even want to speak to anyone who gets paid to listen to me. So you can just imagine how, like where my mindset was at the time. So I just felt like, no, I don't even want that. I'm just going to deal with the best way I know how. And that is how I started journaling a lot. And I used to like write my feelings down. I used to write like every day I would try to write something. And that is pretty much how I got to a point where I had written that open letter to HIV that I later on used to publicly disclose.
So you're saying the open letter to?
Yeah, so I ended up writing an open letter to HIV that I used to disclose on Yes.
And this happened at 18. So from between 14 and 18, it was something that you kept to yourself.
Yes. So between 14 and 18, I really just went through life like nothing had happened. I mean, I told my aunt like 6 months after finding out. So from then onwards, it became like an open secret where it was like, we knew, everyone in my family knew, but we were not saying anything about it. I was also not on treatment at the time. So when I reached 18, my health had deteriorated so badly that I needed to be on treatment. And I think it was only then that the whole reality was really now dawning on me that people are going to start asking questions. So you're going to have to start saying something. So that is when I started writing. And I think it is only then that the whole resentment and feelings of anger started resurfacing.
And the way you've handled it differently, I think it's interesting because there is no wrong way or right way. There's no, there's Saidy's way, there's Nontombi's way. Yeah. So ladies, I would love to touch on dating because now we've dealt with the part where you find out, right? And there's a lot of controversy with, it's up to you whether you want to disclose your status or not. And some people choose to be very public and they even want to be activists, whereas other people are like, this is only for me. I don't want to deal with the stigma or it's just a choice. So let's start with you. So for you personally, when was or when is the right time for you personally to disclose your status to somebody that is interested in you or that you might be interested in?
Okay, for me, like it's always the right time. Like I always protect myself because
in terms of like being rejected if a person finds out later?
Yeah,
okay.
I wouldn't say I fear rejection, but I feel better just putting it out there, just so you know, or in case you want to go home and think about it, or maybe you might be interested a bit further, but I just put it there to say, yes, I'm HIV positive and I'm on treatment. So it's either you're shocked or you're going to say something, but if you can't say anything, I would just leave you there and walk home.
For people watching at home, when somebody that you might be intimate with in future now discovers, what do they usually ask you? Because I can only imagine, okay, I like you, I don't care about your status, so manje.
Okay, for someone who would say they don't really care about your status, it would go further as to saying, so how do we deal with this? Then I can start explaining that, no, I'm on treatment, and if I'm good, like with my treatment and taking it properly, like the virus gets suppressed at some point, and not that we're completely safe, but it's always wise to condomize or use protection or whatever. And then, we can go for monthly checkups or anything. Yeah. Like it's possible. It's not rocket science. It's really possible. Yeah.
In the case of yourself, Saidy, disclosing when you are dating and in relationships? How did you deal with it?
So I try to disclose as early as I can. So in the earlier stages of a relationship, I will disclose. Also because, I mean, as a person whose HIV status is on my social media, all over my social media platforms, I mean, people already know, but I do make it a point that I just say, you are aware, right, that I'm living with HIV. And don't be mentioned, if they are cool with it, awesome. If they're not, still fine, it's okay. We can, honestly, there's only so much that we can do. I can just say, this is who I am, this is what I'm living with. And depending on a person's response, it will then determine how far the relationship goes.
So if then the person says, look, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not comfortable, that's the end for you? Or if you really like a person, is it something that you still try to pursue and educate the person?
No, I don't pursue anything if the person is not comfortable. Honestly, we have so much information in abundance that I feel like I'm not want to educate people. You know what HIV is. You have so much information. If you are keen on learning, you are always welcome to go search on social media, go search on the internet about ways to protect yourself. Of course, as my partner, we can have conversations, but what I'm not going to do is try to persuade someone to stay with me and be like, no, this I can teach you on this and that. I'm not going to do it.
Would you like to have children?
No.
Is it because of your status?
No, it's not because
just
of
its own
it's just
choice.
a personal choice, but it's nothing related to my status.
Then the next question is not relevant to you. Saidy, same question to you. Would you like to have children?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm very indifferent about children and like marriage. I do believe that if they happen, they happen, but if they don't, it's fine. I'm indifferent.
I'm sure the both of you can imagine that I'm asking the question because you were born into this. And, medicine has advanced and there are ways that people who are HIV positive can conceive. So I was just curious to find out from the both of you if you had to think about now having to have that conversation possibly one day with your own child, and what would that look like?
For me, if I later decide to have kids, I would be the most open parent ever. I wouldn't want to put my child through this society of secrecy and taboos and making it look like it's something contagious. But they also need to understand that they need to respect the next person also. Like, be there for them, support them, and read a lot. That's our problem with our society. We don't read, and everything is out in the open. It's hard having to explain yourself over and over again because it's tiring. Information is there. Like Saidy said, we're all over social media, but you can get that one text on Facebook to say, how did you get HIV? And you're like, no, we're not doing this again. So it gets tiring at some point because everything is there. There's technology, we have data, we can search.
We have TV shows, you're here talking.
We hear, but people will be like, nah, I'd rather watch Uzalo than, no. So, yeah.
Yeah. Saidy, on your side, if you decide one day to become a mother and it just so happens your child is HIV positive, what would that conversation look like?
I would be very honest with them. I mean, I was born with HIV, and the reason I do the work that I do is because I really am for there being open conversations about HIV, and there being conversations that are quite honest and open to children, to the kids. So if I were to be a mom, or if I were to decide to be a mom, I would firstly make it a point that they are aware that mom is living with HIV. Whether they were born with HIV or not, I would still be, I would make it a point to let them know that I am living with HIV. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to make them sensitized to people who are living with HIV. I want it to be something that they know that they have to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their HIV statuses. So I would even if they were not living with HIV, I would still make it a point that they understand that we respect people. And we don't
especially because
make it-
their mothers would be HIV positive in the case of both of you.
Yes.
Okay. So just in concluding, I mean, where do you find yourself today in terms of the type of work that you're doing in relation to your status? You've already spoken about how early on it was something you just faced head on and were like, if anybody has questions, I'm an open book, talk to me.
Okay, I still continue with my work. I write a lot. I love writing. And I try do a few videos maybe on Facebook. Like we've had that conversation with Saidy. We're like, hey girl, we need to work together to pump up the volume, because a lot of young people need to hear this. It's like we're not loud enough and it's just us two, but we have the whole world and millions of people living with the virus. But if it's just me and Saidy, we can try. We're not saying we're going to make it happen, but we can try. With the little work that we're doing, we do get calls, we do get texts, WhatsApp messages that ask for advices and guidance. We don't know everything, but we share what we have. And yeah, some stories are touching, but we always try pull ourselves together to say, okay, this person needs my help. I've been through this. Like, I can help this person and bring change. Yeah.
Saidy, on your side, where do you find yourself today, your work, especially in relation to your journey with what we're discussing?
So I am an HIV activist. I use my social media platforms to destigmatize HIV. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 18, even before I knew that it was called activism. I was just doing it online. I also have a channel on YouTube where I also speak on my journey with HIV, but I also try to educate my audience on life and living positively with HIV. So I do a lot of work in the HIV prevention space. And, it's only just to make sure that we let people who are living with HIV know that it doesn't need to define you, but in the same breath, to let those who are not living with HIV know that you don't need to be infected. There are so many different ways of you to prevent yourself from getting HIV. So I believe that by us just having these conversations, Nontombi and I, as she mentioned, we do have these conversations. And I believe honestly that by us just living our lives and being as honest as we are changing the narrative towards how HIV looks like and towards how the lives of people who are living with HIV are viewed.
Ladies, thank you so much. I think for me, my hope really with this episode is that there's a young person who's watching that maybe found themselves in a similar situation to you and is struggling to deal with it, that you can inspire them to find better ways to cope and to face it head on. But also to the parents, maybe one of you at home has a child who is HIV positive and you haven't yet had the opportunity to disclose their status to them. Hopefully that conversation can open up, that you don't just have the conversation, but also support is provided, counseling is provided, treatment is provided, because look at our two guests today. Both of you, 26 years old, living, having been born with HIV, and you are now here speaking about it so positively. Yeah. Thank you so much to the both of you. Thank you so much, Nontombi. Saidy, this was amazing. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Make sure you check out all of our social pages, #Unpacked with Relebogile. We love to hear from you, and I hope that something that you heard today has inspired you. And yes, HIV is still all of our problem, not just those that are born with it or find themselves with a positive status. Let's keep talking. Have a good night. Next time on Unpacked.
If I divorce, I will be told by the church, you can't.
Because your husband is cheating on you.
When it comes to women, culture is screwed. When it comes to a man, culture allows.
Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. New episodes weekdays at 5:30 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Television edited broadcasts weekdays at 5 p.m. Open up to S3.